The Masters is only 1 week away, and I need to get ready. It's every golfer's dream to put on the green jacket. In the last few years, I've been really close. Close enough to know what it takes and how small the margins are. If I'm going to be Masters ready, it starts here. Wow, look at this freaking green. This does feel like Augusta. In this special edition of Course Record, I'll be playing Little Augusta, Texarkana Country Club, which sits on the border of Texas and Arkansas. For years, pros have been using Texarkana to prepare for the Masters. Now it's my turn to play this legendary track. So far this season, I've gone 1 for 1 on course records. Will I keep that streak running hot? Or will Little Augusta have something to say about it?
I don't know if you remember or if you ever looked at that, but the way they got paired together, John had just turned pro, and my tournament director's a member here, knew him. Well, it was right after the Western Open in Chicago, and one of the tour pros couldn't come and play. And so Dennis, the tournament chairman, knew John, and he called him like at midnight, and he was somewhere in western or eastern Arkansas. I said, "Hey, man, I have a pro that can't come and play with the kids tomorrow. Will you come?" And he goes, "Well," he said, "when do I have to need to be there?" And this is like midnight. He says, 8 a.m. He said, "Oh," he said, "Okay." He said, "I'll get my car and come." So he came, and Dennis switched the tee times around, so he ended up playing with Tiger, and that was their very first meeting. First time.
That is crazy.
So anyway, when his son came down here, he saw a picture. He said, "Yeah, Dad's got that same picture on his fridge."
That's wild. I love it. That's so cool.
Isn't that cool?
Got a pretty cool assortment of clubs.
There's some, these are some old stories behind a lot of these clubs.
That's still dirt in there.
Probably.
That is dirt in those grooves still. Hit a rock right here. Look what I brought today, just for fun. A little bit of a tribute. I declare tribute.
From your experience out here before, how close do you think this correlates to an Augusta experience?
Man, I can't remember exactly what it felt like, but seeing it right now with the pines and everything, it feels quite nice. Actually, the smell is very similar to Augusta. It's definitely different, but you can see down there how it kind of looks like some of the edge banks of Augusta too. Just how the water flows into the edge of the grass. It's cool. What a tough round of golf this is going to be, but it's cool because it's great prep for the Masters, going and trying to break the course record. Anything I can take from today in a positive note, I'm happy with. First hole, a little dog leg left. Looks like I can kind of go anywhere, but it seems like right's a little bit better of a play. Come on, body, get ready. Just trying to get my body ready. Okay, here we go. Just a little left. That's going a little too far left, guys. I didn't hear anything, so it should be fine over there. Totally fine. Just a little left of the mark. I could have gotten it there had I hit a good drive, but I pulled it. 60 yards, the flag. I want to get it up. That's really cool because it slopes off on the back. What a great design. And this pine straw is not easy because you can go kind of under it quite easily. You got to get a good stable bounce or a stable setup, and then you want to almost, not bounce the club in, but like trying to hit down on it a little bit more. Huh. Well, that didn't bounce and roll up as hard as I thought it should. That's disappointing. Already struggling on an easy hole. Pin's in a difficult location though. Just time to get up and down here. Nothing crazy. Well, that'll help. I guess that's how you chip in and make birdie in the first hole. See, what I did there that was really nice was I kind of went down, hit the high part of the face, made it pop up a little high and farther, and landed it about 5 feet short of the pin, exactly where I wanted with a good enough amount of spin, and spun it perfectly right in the hole. That's how you hit that shot. Well, that'll help. Maybe I should just do that every time, Chase. 1 under through 1, what a great start. I thought I might make bogey, ended up with birdie. That's sometimes how the cookie crumbles.
Hopefully that's what kind of day it's going to be, just nice and calm, just making shots.
Just doing the normal things and playing great golf like I should. This is a tough hole because it's a dog leg left and I draw the ball, or dog leg right, excuse me, and I draw the ball. So I'm gonna have to, I set up over on the left-hand side to give myself the most room for a draw. And I've got to hit it up high pretty quick because there's a tree in my way. Yeah, right over the pine tree, a little into us off the left. So this will help keep the ball from moving too far to the left. Nice draw, up and over the tree. Just like that.
Yep.
Oh, it's short though, it's not in the fairway. I thought that would be better than that.
It's the right line. It's just
Yeah, a little
you're
short.
not hitting it as far as you're supposed to be.
Well, obviously, because it's freezing out here. It's 30 degrees. I think there's some room. Yeah, 209. This might jump out of here. I know I've got to clear the bunker though, so I don't want to be long. I'm actually gonna play a soft high 7. A 7-iron goes 215 for me, guys. Holy crap. And I set it down right here and it's down grain. This thing looks like it's just gonna jump and go forever, but it's crosswind into the wind. So what I'm gonna do is play this a little softer. So I'm gonna do a 1030 7-iron. Oh, it's short, nope. It only went 190, it said 190. So it was the right shot. It's like just came out a little dead. And see how it spun at 6,700? It actually spun more out of there. So that's one of the things I've got to work on to figure out if it's going to jump or not. And I obviously didn't get it right. I can see why Byron Nelson liked this golf course, because you had to be very strategic. You have to be knowledgeable about where to hit it. I'm so glad I didn't hit it long. Oh, where am I? Oh, I'm way short. How did I go that short? Wow. Well, this is a lot more difficult. I did not play the right shot. This grass is really dead and kind of soft. Hit this, gotta hit this perfect. That's not good. That came out knuckly. Ah! So that's the difficult part about that second shot. You know, if I make a better judgment, I get back to here and it's an easier shot. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Sit. That ran out quite a bit. That's not the way I wanted to start there, Chase. Felt like that was gonna be a better shot than that. Anything else but on a downslope out of the rough over there, and I'm fine. Going by the hole, it didn't really break that much. It's pretty straight. Anything I see is going just a little left. Oh, missed it. Not good. Well, go from starting 1 under to now back to even through 2 with a bogey on 2 is not the way we wanted to go. So, a little frustrating. But you know what? There's plenty more golf to go. 213 into the wind. Wind's off the right. Play a nice little draw on there. 213 playing 220. Land it 2 yards short. So just about a full actually. I'm not hitting it that far right now.
That was that was a little messed up.
Nope, it's part of the game of golf. All right, here we go. Time to go on. That was a good swing. Just pulled it a little bit. Hopefully I can snake this one in there. Get lucky. These greens are great though. Really tiered and sectioned, which is cool. Sit. Oh, that's a lot faster. Okay, that is a lot faster than I thought. Okay, good part. I'll take that and walk out of here quickly. This is a tough par 3, so glad I got through that with a par, but I really haven't figured out how to conquer what to do in this type of grass because it's so variable. And sometimes it spins, sometimes it jumps like a madman.
On to the next.
On to the next, yeah. 4th hole. Hopefully I can drive some greens and start rolling because I should be 2 under right now. Instead I'm even par. Okay, looks like I just go down the middle. Maybe a little bit of a draw. It's downwind. It's a dogleg left. Kind of reminds me of number 5 at Augusta. which is cool. All right, come on, lock in. It's a little left again. I feel like I'm swinging it good. It's just not going exactly where I want it to go. And that's the difficult part sometimes. Hopefully I get a good lie over here. And while I'm driving up to see if I got a good lie or not, let's get a quick update on this year's course record sponsor, Kalshi. Kalshi is a peer-to-peer prediction market where you can trade on real-world outcomes, and it's available nationwide. You can trade on almost anything, from how many course records I'm gonna break this year, to March Madness and alien sightings.
When does that happen?
After getting my first course record in episode 1, the odds updated. Let's see if I can keep it going in this one. Get a $20 bonus if you sign up now with the link in the description. This hole definitely reminds me of 5 at Augusta, guys. So I'm in another rough fly. Just got to be confident with whatever I choose. I've got to be confident. That's the most important thing. So, what am I? Oh wait, it is downwind. I'm hitting a lower shot. Trying to draw it around here. Low draw. 930. It's perfectly in line. It's what I was trying to do. Just didn't go far enough. Great shot too. Man. Sometimes that's the difficult parts of golf courses. Is like, if this was ryegrass, like I could judge that way easier than the rough because that came out dead. I thought it was gonna come out a little hotter. So time to chip in here. Well, that didn't stop or spin or anything. 15 footer, a little down the hill. Play 13 feet. Nope. Sit. Yep, 1 over through 4. Let's see where we can go. Oh wow, there's only 3, but it's into the wind. This is a drivable hole if it's not into the wind. All right, wind's off the left. Needed a nice driver right over this cart path. Come on. See where that went? Interesting test of golf. I've long forgotten how difficult Bermuda rough is. I haven't played it in quite a while, and I respect how we just don't play it very much anymore. I got to start in the fairway here soon. I don't feel like I'm hitting it bad. It's just not going where I needed to go. I'm gonna play a lower flighted shot here, 55 degree, 80-yard shot. So 95, 80. Yeah, this is 930 here again. Sick. Just got smoked and didn't go out of the rough. Didn't shoot at all. Darn it. This looks like it's going up and over, a little down, but overall it's up like a 2% on average. From my ball to the hole, I'm playing this 2% up, which for a 36 footer is gonna play, it's gonna be 6 more feet, so 42 footer. Into the wind, 43, 44 feet. Yeah, sick. Thought I had a good putt. Bounced a little bit going up the slope. All right. That's another horrible par. I've really got to step it up and make some crazy shots coming in to give myself a chance. Okay, 76 downwind, about 8 yards. I'm going right for this flag. So I just chunked that. I did not feel like I chunked that. What is going on? This bunker feels a little soft. All right. That was a good shot. Bunker's pretty soft, pretty straight putt. If anything goes a little left. All right, par. That was a horrible par, guys. My ball striking is not up to par right now, or up to birdie. It's up to par, not up to birdie. Moving on. Okay, so dogleg left, par 5, I believe. I've got to get something going here. Pretty straight down, a little bit off the left. I'm gonna hit it right over these trees on the right-hand side where the pine trees are. Come on, Bryson. Should be good.
That was your line, right?
I think so. A little slow. Not great, but that's fine. We'll see where it is. I hope it's in the fairway. It's kind of where I was aiming, probably 10 yards right of where I was aiming. And again, all you're doing, guys, is just hitting the next shot and trying your best. That's it. I see it. I think I see it. Right in the rough. Gosh. Every time, right in the rough, guys. 192 to the flag, just missed the fairway. I'm gonna hit a pitching wedge. This better be the right club. It's downhill too, so it's gonna be 70 shot. Yeah, 70 shot. Fly, 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 fly. I think it's good. I mean, that's what I wanted to do. Hit it over the tree with a pitching wedge. I could have hit a 9-iron and cut it, but I felt more comfortable just going straight up and over. I thought it was gonna go a lot more. I love these shots though. These are my favorite. Good grain. It's not crazy into the grain. This is almost down grain. It's perfectly up. 11-yard little chip, bounce it up, roll it in the cup. Oh. That was a good shot though. I felt really good on that one. Back to even, 11 more to go. Even par through 7. How am I doing? Shoot! That was a good birdie. Normal birdie. Can't even hit a freaking green with a wedge right now, dude. I don't know what is going on. There's some fun holes coming up here. This one looks like one of them. It's gonna be interesting. Let me get my Bushnell. And on these types of shots, I'm trying to focus on making a more inside out motion to draw the ball. So, you know, whenever I have to hit a certain shot shape, I'm trying to focus on moving it inside out or swinging more out to the right with a little bit more of a turn on the club. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely see there's shot shaping that makes it feel like Augusta. I drew it really hard, but it's not drawn enough. Sit down, sit down. Jeez. That's fairway. Good drive in the fairway. Finally, first fairway of the day. And I tried to draw the crap out of that, and it did not draw. Well, it was nice to go to some places that were relatively warm, like Riyadh in Australia, and I usually play well and feel good in those conditions, but when it gets cold in the winter, I don't like playing very much golf. But the only way I can really practice is using the net return back at home. So it's nice, guys, to be able to hit inside and practice in the wintertime when it's freezing or snowing out. You can still get your practice in. With the Masters a week away, I'm using net return more than ever. When I'm at home and I need to put in quality work, this is where I go. What I love is that I can work on exactly what I need to. Shot shaping, trajectory, whatever it is, I'm getting real feedback every time. Check them out at thenetreturn.com. Next week, they're even running a special Masters promotion.
10 yards.
Yep. 91, end of the wind, 10 yards. 101, 103. So I'm gonna try to hit a 103 shot. Hopefully I can hit a 103 shot. One of 4.
Go in the hole.
Okay, finally a good wedge shot. That's why you get net return, so you can work on your wedges indoors and you can hit good wedges. Hey, when it's from the fairway and off of grass, it's great. When it's off of this stuff, you get penalized. So I shouldn't.
So maybe you should try to hit it in the fairway.
I don't know, maybe this is the wrong way to do it, guys, but when I'm wedging, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and tell me if there's a way to do it better, but I feel it a lot and like how hard I'm hitting it. But what I do is take it back to a certain area and I just sense how hard that's gonna be. That's a 100-yard shot, you know, or a 95-yard shot, or I don't know, that's how I sense it. Okay, 1 under through 8. Wow, what a rocky start. All right, nice draw here. I'm gonna be aggressive here. This is calling for a draw shape. So swing inside out, turn the face over. Wind is off the left.
Come on.
Come on, wind. That was so good.
We're in
That should be
grass.
fairway. That was 12 left spin axis. Yeah, this thing is curving a lot, but I felt good over it. It felt really like a good swing, so we'll see. I'd also say, guys, too, we're gonna start answering some golf questions for y'all. I feel like we haven't been active enough and want to start answering your questions and engage you guys a little bit more. Well, I would say this. What's the biggest question you've wanted to ask a professional golfer? And I'll be responding to that. You know, most of the questions, I hope they'll be intriguing and I'll try to answer as much as I can, but for the most part, I want to start answering questions back to you guys and give you a little more feedback, because that's what YouTube's about. That's what the comment section's for. 108 yards. It's gonna play 12 yards into the wind, so 122. 2 past 124, just under 10 o'clock. .6 left. I mean, I had the right spin axis, it just got pumped by the wind. 15 feet up a 2. Gonna play this thing 19 feet or 18 feet. Come on. It's knocking in. No, break. Ah, actually went that way. That's too bad. It actually went left. I don't know if you guys saw that on the video, but I was expecting it to go right. It actually went left at the end. Hit a good putt. Didn't go in, didn't read it right. Gotta go 10 under through 9 holes. Let's see if I can do it. Okay, wind's off the left. Supposed to go over this big tree. Okay, he's staying right there. Okay. I'm gonna hit it right there. That's what he said. So I'm going right of the tree. Here we go.
That's dead straight.
Right at him. I'm gonna play perfect golf going in, but this is great prep for my mental state. It's really kicking me in the butt going, what are you doing? You're not focusing hard enough on playing the best golf you possibly can. So, okay, I gotta play this up in the air a little bit. 129. I'll play this 1030, just about 1030. It's gonna be a 125 shot. Well, this is really difficult here. On the edge of the bunker, into the grain. Got to hit more of an explosion shot, so this is a big guess on my part. I just have to be confident here and focus on making a properly executed just shot that I'm envisioning in my head, which is a little more aggressive, kind of like a bunker shot, and popping it out a few feet and getting it up there. Yep. All right, that's as good as I got. Okay, this looks pretty straight to me. 13 feet. Put a good roll on it. Come on, give me some confidence. Yep.
Come on.
Okay, 47. This should be off the right, maybe in just a fraction. So I'm gonna play a 10 o'clock pitching wedge, try to control the spin. 47, gonna play a 50 shot, so just over 10 o'clock. I think that's really short because it's more into the wind. No, it should be more downwind. I don't know. That was 44. 144, so look at that. I was trying to play just over, so it should be 6 yards short, so it's just 20 feet. If it's more than 20 feet, it means it's more into the wind, and I didn't get the wind right. So, okay, this is a double breaker here. You can't really see it on camera, but it's going uphill to this point and then downhill this next little part. So 27 feet, the last 21 feet are going downhill. So I'm breaking this putt up into two putts, quite quickly in my head too. So this first 6-footer is just uphill, it's pretty straight. So I'm not gonna worry about the first putt for the last 21 feet. Last 21 feet are going down and breaking right to left on a 2.5%er. So 2.5% on 20 feet, it's gonna play 10, 11 feet. I can hit this thing 12 feet over the top. Watch this thing break right and then go back left. Sit, break.
Go back.
Oh, I told you. I just hit it that hard. It cost me a birdie on that hole.
You're not
try.
getting anything.
Huh?
So I have 2 par 5s?
2 par 5s, yeah. And 1 more par 3. Almost made a birdie on a par 3, Chase.
Yeah.
Guys, a birdie on a par 3 is like golden nuggets for me.
But you got toilet bowled.
It's right in the corner. Okay. Let's see if I can just push all this now. 300. I'm pumping this. I hit it right where I wanted. Okay, it's time to birdie every single hole coming in. 174.
This is nice.
Yeah, this looks like 13 at Augusta a little bit. Obviously the creek is flipped, but yeah, this is kind of cool. Just the vibe and feel of it, the slope and up against the thing. Yeah, it's cool. 179. This pitching wedge is getting its use in. I think that's in the water. Oh, there's a ball in there. Yeah, I see it. Oh, there it is. Gosh, man, my mental game is being tested today. 20 feet. Okay, 20 feet. Down 2%, straight putts over here. 20 feet down at 2. Nope. All right, that's a par. It's getting cold. That's the tough part about the game. When the temperature changes, you gotta adjust for it. You feel like you're swinging really slow. It's not easy. 97 playing 202. 202 into the wind. That's where it starts swirling around here, which is kind of cool. This is 13. I think this is perfect if I just flight this a little bit. Oh my gosh, it's getting smoked. Okay. I still got smoked by a crazy amount. Yeah, this is pretty cool. The environment, all the little pine trees and all the pine leaves in the ground. This ground is soft too. So it gives away, the dirt gives away quite easily. Cool design. A lot of similarities to how I design a golf course. Big slopes and angles and different things like that. So pretty sweet. Let's knock this putt in. 31 feet. Up the slope, up of 2, 31, it's 1.5, 31 feet. Break. Come on, dude, you son of a gun. This golf course is nuking my nuts. This reminds me of 15 at, one of the holes at Spyglass Hill. It's like this is dogleg right. I'm gonna try something fun. Just want to show you what I can do. All right, y'all ready for this? I want to see where that goes. It's for fun. Well, that's not the way you play the All-American hole, because this hole's referenced as one of the greatest golf holes in America. So, you know me and some of the greatest golf holes, I just love doing the craziest stuff. But at one point in time, this was one of the top 18 holes in America. So, pretty cool. Did I hit the top of the tree? If I would have drew it more, I would have had the shot. You just need to hook it more. But that is the shot. No way that comes back. How am I supposed to know that? 13 yards, run it up. Come on. A little thin, not bad. This looks like a 7-footer outside the edge, 2 inches. This looks great. Man. All right, back to even. I thought I hit a perfect shot there, and I clearly didn't realize I had to be pin high and whatnot. So that's disappointing. I thought the wind was more, it's more off the left right now. 342. See if I can pump driver right up next to it. Come on, wind, push it, push it, push it. There you go, push it, push it. God, that's a good swing. I don't know, did you see it?
Yeah. It kicked right.
Okay,
I saw
hopefully it rolls up there.
Bunker.
No, it should be good. I mean, I think that's exactly what I was trying to do. It should be good. See if I can finish off strong. Let's get up and down, get a birdie back, get back to 1 under. I at least got to shoot in the 60s out here. Good protection, good bunker protection here. I'm on a downslope right now in the bunker. And it's got to trundle out because of that just a bit more. So I'm gonna land it a little shorter than what I'd like, which is landing it up on top. I need to land it on the upslope and let it run out. Sit, sit, sit. Yeah, that's about it. That's what I was trying to do there. One under, that's a good up and down, good birdie on this hole. So it's just a different test. It's just a little different of a test, but it's nice to see shots, where you need to be, how to execute them, where to be at, and really make sure you're missing it in the right places is huge, and I have not done that today. This is a par 5, 560. This reminds me a little bit of number 11. Yeah, this is also where Byron Nelson made an albatross, which is quite cool. Let's see if I can stripe one out there. That's a little right of where I wanted to go, but I think I'm okay. Trying to cut it around the corner, just pushed it a little bit. Here's the deal. So I'm trying to hit it up over the mountain right here in front of me and cut it enough when it's into the wind. And unfortunately, I can't, it's 233, so I can't hit a 5-iron there. It's too low, cut it too much, it's not gonna get there. So, and it's cold, so I gotta play this like finagling cut that it's gonna play like a 250 shot, which is just under 1030. Well, it's just gonna be a cut 1035 wood for me. So I'm gonna hit a little cut here. This is gonna be a specialty shot. See what we can do here. Come on.
Oh,
Just like
baby.
That was pretty sick.
Imagine you get an albatross.
That would have been sick. An albatross, talking about Byron Nelson's albatross, that would have been nuts. But no, I suck again. What else is new? 12 feet up to the top. Up 4. Come on. Or it doesn't do that and it goes left. It did nothing of what I thought it was going to do. Okay. Oh, nice birdie. I really thought I was going to make par there after a good 2 shots in there. So back to 1 under or
2 under?
no, Yeah, 2 under. I'm 2 under now, thank goodness. This is a tricky one, unfortunately. If I had another chance at it, like, it'd be a totally different scenario. But we gotta have like round 2s with these golf courses for course records. Well, right in between, 270, into the wind, 285. I'm gonna try for a 3-wood and hit it really hard. This one's gonna be hit hard. I'll stop drawing. Yeah, it's on the green, just a little left. That was pumped too. It was a 173 ball speed in this temperature. Holy crap, that was hit hard. That was good though, that's what I wanted to do. Man, it is getting really cold out here. I can't tell you how much the cold affects the golf ball and a person's feeling with their golf swing, but I feel really good. My golf swing feels amazing. My putting feels great. My chipping feels great. My wedging, even surprisingly, it's not doing as well. It still feels good. I don't get it. I don't get it, man. It's golf, but at least it gets my brain in a good mental frame. That's why I like doing these course record videos, because it shows me where my game actually is. And this is a good test of golf. Like, it's a proper test of golf. And really enjoy it, but I wish I was just doing a little better. This thing is 54 feet, guys. Wow, look at this freaking green. Look at this green, guys. This is a bunch of moguls. This does feel like Augusta a bit. This green, this is the way they are. I'll hit it a little harder and I might have gone in. That was a good roll. Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, I broke a lot there. Well, story of my day, unfortunately. All right, I've got to hit a massive hook around here.
It's kind of a nasty shot from back here.
Yeah. All right, up over these trees, around the corner. All right, well, that's what I was trying to do. Let's see. Where it all is, I can't feel my hands right now, Chase. Yeah, just letting you guys know, this is definitely a shot maker's paradise. Something that's strategic. So somebody like me, it's a little more difficult in certain instances to keep it in the fairway or whatnot. Great golf course to practice at. Get comfortable with different line of sights and whatnot. So this should make me very aware of what I'm lacking going into Augusta. But for the most part, you know, these curves are actually more exaggerated than Augusta, like the dog legs and everything. So quite interesting, but good preparation in my mindset for trying to hit certain types of shots. Now it's just on to my wedging, and if I can make some putts, get comfortable with the green speeds, I'll be good to go. 107, into the wind, playing 115 cold, 115. So this is gonna be a 9:30 shot. This 10 o'clock goes 130, 9:30 it's gonna go 115. All right, 115, come on. 112, go, 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 go. All right. Good shot, 1.2 left, 112 shot within 3 yards. 16 feet on a 2%. It's gonna be 20 inches up. Okay, should go in. There we go. Thank you. That was hit a little hard. It was a little aggressive, but it went in and shot 69 on a 6,969 yard golf course. All right, ready to go for another 18?